Hello and welcome to Hacking HR June series. I'm Mine. I'm based in Istanbul, and today I will be your moderator for this event. So before we kick off, let's see in the comments who we have in the audience. We usually have a great diversity of audience, and let's see who we have. Just in the comment section, you can write where you're joining from, so that we know who you are and where you're joining from. It's 5 p.m. here in Istanbul, Turkey, so it's almost the end of our day, but I know that we have people joining from all around the world. So let's see if we have anyone. Minneapolis, yes. Hi, Anna. Hello, someone from Birmingham, UK, from mountains in Idaho, Arkansas, USA. Wow, it must be early. Maybe not that early, but in the Pacific time zone, it must be a bit early. We have who else from Canada? Romania. Okay, that's close. Moldova. Okay, hi Europe. Poland and Virginia. Who else? Who else? So, anyone from Western Europe? Do we have anyone from Africa or Western Europe or Asia? Must be really late in Asia though. Ireland. Okay, we have someone from Ireland. We have people joining all around the world, and that's the beauty of Hacking HR webinars, because we have such diversity of audience joining from all around the world. And Wisconsin, amazing. Such diversity. It's always great to have these different culture backgrounds. So when we are talking about as HR and people, it's great to share different perspectives from all around the world. Originally from Africa, but living in Dublin, amazing. And we also appreciate your comments, your suggestions, your questions in the comments. So please feel free to add them in the comments, because I will be keeping an eye on your comments and questions and directing them to our panelists. And someone from Italy and Austria. Great. So I think it's time to invite our panelists on the stage. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. How is everyone?
Good, thank you.
Hi there.
Very good, thank you.
Amazing. So let's have a quick round, and if you can introduce yourself and where you're joining from, so that we know more about our panelists. And you're the first on my screen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I said good morning because I'm in Boston, Boston, Massachusetts, USA, and I am the founder of an HR consulting company, Elastic Consulting, and excited to be here this morning.
It's great to have you, Francia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm joining you from Berlin. I am 20 years in HR, and the employee journey is absolutely one of my favorite topics to discuss. And so I'm just super happy to be here with you today.
Amazing. Welcome. So, Sherry, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. Sherry Chernak, based in Austin, Texas. I am a consultant at Mercer focused on HR organization and workforce transformation, a former head of HR, and excited to talk about employee experience and touch points on the employee journey.
Great to have you here. Carol. I think you are having a connection issue. Can you hear us? You're breaking up. Let's go with Sue.
Hi, everyone. I am Sue. I'm an HR director for one of the U.S.'s largest home health care self-directed companies. I'm based in Missoula, Montana. I've been in HR for about 23 years, and I'm very excited about the onboarding and just overall employee experience.
Amazing. So we have a group of experienced HR professionals. So it's a great opportunity for us to hear from you, your expertise. And let's kick off the discussion by defining what an employee engagement is. Because like now, for the last couple of years, we have been hearing, problems about employee engagement. Everyone's so much focused on that. And it is actually like about building that experience and like an end-to-end experience. And we have been seeing so many methodologies, frameworks in place. But let's talk about the experience itself. What is it in practice? And do you want to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to. So an employee experience, gosh, it's a very broad thing to put a definition around. And that's why I'm excited that as we get into today's conversation, we're going to be talking about key touch points along the way, right? Because an employee experience is made up of all the different interactions that an employee has with the workplace. So with their manager, with their colleagues, what's the culture like, what's the benefits packages like, and it really starts, well before they even become an employee. What's that offer look like, an onboarding process, et cetera. So to me, the employee experience is all of these different touch points along the way that kind of collectively make up that overall an experience that an employee has. And I'll let others answer as well, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It starts before they even get hired. It's from the moment they get selected for an interview, maybe even before that, some would argue, but that's really when it starts, all the way through the end of their employment. I mean, it's everything from their recruiting experience, through their onboarding, through their training, through their ongoing performance, the culture, the interactions they have with their coworkers, their managers. All of those items are part of the employee experience. So it's very broad, but it's could be very impactful depending on their experience.
Sue, I definitely agree with you. And I actually even think that the first call that they have with the recruiter tells you so much about the organization that you're going to join, right? That first email, is it excited? Does the recruiter sound like they really want you to come on board? That first touch point, that very first, hi, I'm such and such from such and such company, really starts the employee experience, because it really starts to build that momentum. Do I want to come, and what kind of organization am I going to join?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Carol, shall we try again? If we can hear you well. So if you can start with introducing yourself, and the question is, how do we define employee experience? I think we're having trouble with your connection.
Hello.
Okay, Sherry, you want?
Can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, we can hear you now, but I think you're breaking up. Let's try again.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Carol. I'm calling in from Nigeria, in Africa. I work with Stanbic IBTC Bank. So just in terms of the employee, I would just add to the conversation. What I would say with the employee experience would look at the entire value chain. How does the employee feel? What would the employee say as a result of that experience, and how would the employee re-communicate that experience? So it's three things. How does the employee feel? What would the employee say? And how would they retell the story? So it's really about what happens at each touch point. So if look at it from when the employee is onboarded, even up until the point of exit. You're looking at from attraction to learning to reward to recognition to exits, onboarding, all of that, just through employee life cycle, in, as you may put it. And I guess the way I would also add to that would be, in each of these areas, there are moments that matter. So at each of the moments that matter, it's about articulating what it is you want the employee to feel, what it is you want the employee to say, and how you want them to retell the story, and creating experiences that ensure that happens. So I would say that employee experience is something that you are very intentional about, and it's that intentionality enables each stakeholder within the organization, or even if it's out of the organization, who's part of that process to create that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sherry, how would you define employee experience on top of everything else that we were talking about?
I kind of feel like everything has been, everything has been said. So I, in the interest of continuing the conversation, I'll just nod to all the great input that we've heard.
Okay, so can you just specify what is the most significant part of the culture that's impacting the employee experience? Because now we all agree that it starts even before you join the company. So it's about starts from the hiring process, even before the hiring process, and goes on until the exit. And so that is also correlated with the culture of the companies. But what are those most significant parts in that culture that's impacting the employee experience?
I think from my perspective, it's the values and behaviors that the organization prioritizes and expects and rewards or incentivizes, because that is going to drive a lot of decisions about what employee experience should look like, the employee experience that an organization wants to have, as well as how people carry it out. Employee experience is very much dependent on how leaders, managers, and employees behave, contribute to employee experience, and shape employee experience. So the choices that an organization makes and what it prioritizes are among the most important elements that will drive employee experience for good or for bad.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else who wants to add on top? Sue?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. So I think Carol brought up a good point. It's a lot of it is how the employee feels about their employment. Do they feel good that they work there? Do they not feel good? And to go along with Sherry, that has a lot to do with the company culture, and every piece of that employee experience, all those touch points. Does the employee feel good? And that goes back to the company's values, really, and how the employees are treated, and how the leadership interacts with those employees.
Yeah. And
yeah, I was just gonna add on, and I really appreciated Sherry's comment around the values and beliefs, and I was just gonna add on to that it's not a one size fits all company. So I really appreciated her comments around, what does the company want to prioritize, and how does that translate into the culture, and how does the leadership team help to uphold that? And wholeheartedly agree. And like I said, just adding on that it's going to look different, and that's okay. And it really should be that conscious choice of what is this organization's values and beliefs.
Amazing. And so I would also like to touch now the touch points. And we've been expressing some of them, starting from the recruitment phase and going on till the exit. But how do we identify those? I mean, does that, differ from one company to the other? Or are they some common touch points that we need to just, use in every company, or can we have like, some specific ones for depending on the industry or depending on the size of the company? Francia?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one experience that every employee, irregardless of the size of the company or the industry, it's that day one experience. Everybody has to walk into a company, whether it's virtual or not, on day one. And I think there's so much excitement for an employee that goes into that moment. You've made the decision to start a new job, you have new colleagues, you want to make a good impression. And I think it's super important that a company really invests in that day one experience. I think most of us have had the experience where you've joined a company and, as an example, your laptop might not be there, or equipment doesn't work, or your manager doesn't meet you. And that's a little bit of a blow to the employee. And it really, for all the time and energy that's been invested in ensuring that that person comes on board, for everybody involved in that process, it's a little bit, it takes a little bit out of the steam of that hire for that day one experience not to be done properly. So I would really say in the onboarding experience, in the employee life cycle, like everything else, if you can make that day one special, memorable, regardless of industry, that's really a moment that you must prioritize to ensure that the employee has a great experience.
That's like a first impression, as we say.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to create that first impression and to make it positive.
That memory,
Sue,
yes.
you want to? Yep.
Yeah, so I think key touch points throughout the employee experience depends on a lot on the size of the company. So your smaller companies, you're going to be more interactive. Larger companies have to be more intentional with those touch points. So, recruiting touch point on a day one touch point, maybe the end of the first week. Then we have, maybe 2 weeks in, 30 days in, 60 days in, whatever the case may be. I think a lot of it depends on, the size of the company and how, how the company is able to support those touch points. But I do think they have to be intentional.
Yeah, intentionality, I think, is really key. Sherry, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say, there are employee life cycle related touch points that are very critical, and then there are life related touch points. And I think it's important to thread through both. So there are the ones that are planned when you start, when you're onboarded, when you hit certain milestones in your career. And I think especially during the last several years, we've come to appreciate the way that life related touch points are important. So if somebody is about to have a child, what does that touch point look like? If somebody is dealing with a sick parent or family member, if somebody is struggling with health issues, etc. So I think that in addition to all of the touch points that we think about from an employee's progression with an organization and career progression, it's very important not to forget those touch points, which often when, I do a lot of work around moments that matter. Often the moments that matter and the ones that stick in the minds of employees are how they were treated when they needed the most help. So I think that's really an important aspect of touch points to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love this idea because usually when we are talking about these touch points, we automatically think about, the transactional ones or the things about the work and, the employee journey, but not think about the personal journeys that each one of us have. So I really love that idea. Carol, you want to add anything?
Yes, please. Thank you. I hope this is much better now.
It's much better, but can you speak up a bit?
Okay. Is it better now?
Now we have like a background noise. Can you try again?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just checking in again.
Yes,
Okay.
much better.
Thank you. Yeah, so much has been shared. So just to add to
I think when you come closer to the laptop, there is like this, humming noise.
Okay. Sorry about this. I'm not sure what has happened to
No
my
worries.
today. Yeah, so just to add to what has been shared.
Well, it's happening again. I'm not sure when or how it happens, but there's this humming sound that's just like, we cannot hear you. Let's try again.
Okay. I'll say just
No.
okay, let me take out.
You're on mute.
Taken out my earphones now, so I hope this is
Okay.
better.
Perfect. So
Okay.
let's keep it
So it was
perfect.
probably was the
Right now.
earphones. Okay, yeah. Thank you. I do sincerely apologize for this. I'm
No
not sure what has
worries.
happened today. Okay, so just to add to what has been shared, I think that the moments that matter is really a key part to this, and it's really about being deliberate about this as well. And one of the things that I've seen work as well is also understanding the team that you're dealing with, because there would be things that you should do as a standard, but there should also be things that you do in a varied mode. So, for certain teams, for example, if you're dealing with a highly professional team, you may want to consider other milestones. So, milestones such as how do you celebrate professional achievements? Those things would matter in a highly professional team. So, it's also that flexibility to say, yes, there would be what is a standard across board, but there is also what would be varied, which would speak to the individuals in the team. So that's also something that I've seen that employees really do connect with, and something that also creates a significant impact when you do talk about employee experience. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is really well said. Anne, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly add onto that, because I agree that there are standard touch points, both from a professional standpoint as well as a personal standpoint. But where you can see differences, to Carol's point around the teams, and then I was just thinking about if you have a global organization, in particular, many of those key moments that matter in an employee's life, the expectations and the experiences are going to look different country to country if you're having a baby, or healthcare. And these are things that are critical for that employee and matter a lot, but there are going to be those cultural nuances across geography, even within the same company. I know your original question was around how does it differ between company sizes and such, but I think even within the same company you might have differences based off of geography, or if you have union and non-union employees, et cetera. So taking some of that into account.
This is really important to highlight, because I was also going to ask about how remote work, how geographically distributed teams are dealing with this. So this is exactly what I was going to ask, and I think this is really important. So I think, Sue, you want to add something to that topic?
Yes, I was going to talk about remote versus in office, just that very topic. So, remote employees, you're probably going to have to add a few more touch points. They may feel more disconnected than in office employees. So that employee experience journey might look a lot different than someone you're sitting right next to or down the hall from. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind.
Exactly. And also, like as Anne was mentioning, even within the same geography, you might have a different cultural background. So I would also like to ask how we can manage this from the perspective of DEI, so that we are embracing the needs of all the people in our company, all the employee resource groups. And if you have any good examples how you are managing that, that would also be great to share with our audience. Shay?
Yeah. So thinking about inclusive design of employee touch points, and bringing a design lens, I think it's important to think about what are the great if you look across the employee population, what are the greatest challenges that need to be solved? Where are the needs? Where are the challenges and opportunities the greatest? And by designing from that point of view, what tends to happen is that the coverage then improves for everyone else. So just to use an example of of on-site versus remote employees to bring home that point. If you think about onboarding as an example, and you think about bringing remote employees into the office and designing a series of meetings to learn about the organization, to spend time with leaders and have access to them, to connect with colleagues and peers, designing that kind of experience with the remote employee who might not have the opportunity to do that again, maybe for a quarter or a year, maybe in some cases ever. Some organizations are primarily remote first. That would then create a robust onboarding experience for a wide range of employees, and one that is high touch, memorable, and sticky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is really important, high touch. And so in that case, do we need to like design different employee journeys for each group? How does that happen? I mean, do we have something like overarching the whole community and then have, little specific ones for each group? Or is it just like, can be accommodated throughout the journey? Carol, you want to go? You're on mute.
One of the things
Okay.
that I've seen work practically is just around, and this is just responding to your questions around, do you have different employee journeys? And I guess that the way that I've seen it work is actually being described as a shape and a take. So a shape to the extent that you have one employee journey, which is described as your take journey, which is there would be things that everyone connects with. So whether you're looking at it from onboarding, so if you're looking at onboarding for on-site workers, if you're looking at it for onboarding for remote workers, that again you can take as something that is take. So the employee or the onboarding experience may be similar in that case. But then you have what is shape. So the shape would then be what you adjust to your different groups. So if you then start to look at, for example, if you start to look at people who are remote, for example, how does the learning journey for someone who's remote happen? How does the, if you have engagement activities, how do the engagement activities for someone who's remote happen? That would differ from someone who's on site. So that's where you then start to have a shape journey, which is then tailored to meet the specific needs of a particular employee group. As it where you can then start to look at things, maybe if you have different demographies as well, what would appeal to an older generation would be different to what would appeal to maybe a Gen Alpha or a Gen Z. Those sort of things would then start to be what would be shaped, but you would then have broadly what is more take, which is similar across the different groups. That's something that I've seen work quite practically. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we talked about training, we talked about onboarding, and so what are meetings? What are those like other critical processes in the company that needs to be tailored to these specific groups of people when we are talking about the employee journey? Anyone wants to go?
Yeah, I would say there's one piece that we haven't quite touched on as yet, and I think many companies take a look at this, but it's really super critical to shaping the employee experience. It's feedback.
Mm,
I
yeah.
think many, and you hear it as HR practitioners, oftentimes that feedback cycle when an employee gets their first official appraisal. And that's a critical moment in the journey, right? I mean, an employee starts to get a sense of um, how does a leader actually talk to them about how they've performed? How do they coach them? How do they mentor them? And how do they deliver news that might not be the greatest? And really, for many employees, that becomes the moment where they go, "Oh, this is a great company. It fosters my development, and I can grow." Or, I'm getting news that I probably should have got 6 months ago.
Mm,
So that moment, and so many people have it, so many companies have it in their employee life cycle, the first appraisal, the feedback moment. But it is really that moment that someone knows, hey, this is a company for me or a company not for me based on how both good and bad news is delivered.
this is really important. And I think that feedback is also defining the quality of the employee engagement and experience. So, and as we were talking about in the beginning, like how people feel is really key, because that's only going to be the thing that's going to stay with them, not the incidences, nothing but the feeling. So when they go back to their experience in the company, is going to be that feeling that's going to stay with them. So this is really important about that feedback mechanism, that is, going to make the experience either like a positive feeling or like a negative feeling. And that brings us to the question of leadership. So how do you see the role of leadership in defining these touch points? And so where does the leadership team step in defining those touch points to create a positive employee experience? And
Yeah, so I think it might look different depending on the size of the organization and the involvement of the HR team. But I think first and foremost, no matter what's mapped out and you can have all the greatest, employee journey mapping with multiple personas, and here's what this person's going to experience, and here's what this person's going to experience. But if the leadership team isn't participating in that and isn't the one, bought in, and they're the ones who are ultimately that employee is going to have the majority of those experiences with, maybe outside the benefits side of things. And so, I think ideally you have the leadership team bought in that this is important, that talent is important to the organization, that understanding the employee journey is important to the organization, that they participate in some of the design thinking sessions, or, if that sounds too formal, just participate in looking at the journey that's been mapped, the different touch points, and what role they play in each of these, and kind of ensuring that is ultimately the experience, that the experience that you have on paper is ultimately the experience that an employee is having with the organization.
Exactly. Sue?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. A lot of the employee experience is going to be manager or leadership focused. I think HR can help drive that employee experience and those touch points, and kind of coach the leadership on how to have those touch points and how to make them meaningful. But ultimately, it's going to be the leadership responsibility to have those touch points and to make those touch points meaningful, and ensure that the employee feels good about working there throughout the whole journey.
Mm-hmm. So they, like, acting like the gatekeepers, or so that they keep an eye and also walk the talk, because usually when we don't have the leadership buy-in, or if they're not walking the talk, then it all stays as a theory and just, it's like it stays in the strategy but not in execution. So it's really important to get their involvement. Sherry?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. There's a phrase that I learned from a leader of mine and that I've adopted, which is leader led, HR enabled. So, who does the detailed design work? It's less important that leaders necessarily be involved in every step than
Mhm.
that they set the priorities and that they make choices and value judgments that reinforce the importance of employee experience.
Exactly. And Carol, do you want to add anything on top of that, or do you have any best practices from leadership that you would say have worked?
I think I do completely agree or align with all that has been shared. But just also to say that leadership actually plays such a critical role in enabling the right employee experience, as it were, because without that leadership touch, really from a HR perspective, you don't get it right because the line managers are the ones who spend a greater percentage of the time with the employees. So getting that buy-in from line leadership, getting line leadership to see the role that they play and how critical this is also something that is really important. One of the things that I've also seen work is and maybe may not apply in all climates, but it's sort of like when you start off on this journey would be to sort of have a dashboard where you're able to measure different managers. So you're sort of having like a line manager effectiveness index, just specifically relating to employee experience. Because if you then look at it in terms of how this ultimately impacts on client experience and being able to say, okay, for this particular business unit, the line leaders in this have really bought into or really sponsor the whole employee experience agenda or sponsor the employee journey agenda. That's something that I've also, so it's in a way recognizing the efforts of line leadership and celebrating those who have who've adopted this and then using that as a way to peer coach, because they certain line managers may then ask other people, who, how have you done this and all of that. So just to summarize would be leadership is such a critical plays such a critical role in this and can either make or mar the whole conversation around the employee experience. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is really important. And it's not only, one shot strategy or like an activity that needs to be done. So whatever we discuss now makes it also sustainable so that it does not go away with the change of a leader too. So, I mean, it's really important to take this as a strategy and have it embraced by the leader so that this is sustainable and repeatable in the company. There is one question from audience. Without lifetime employment, how can companies build trust? And this is very important because like trust has been, really on the table for some time now. Everyone's just, especially in remote setup, leaders are just judging that trust, and we are judging leaders, of course, again, like micromanaging or how to build that trust in the teams and just how to make sure that we are making it again sustainable. So how do you see that happening? Sherry?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. I think and that's the way you pose it is so interesting, considering that employment does not last a lifetime. I think one of the things that an organization can do is have a talent philosophy that it shares. So in I've worked in and with startups where the value proposition for employees is that they come in, that they spend probably 2, 3, 5 years of their lives and careers at most, gaining incredible experience that they parlay into bigger and better opportunities in the future, and they join the family of alumni of the startup. And if that is something that everybody agrees to and jointly understands, then they can build trust in that framework. Whereas some organizations would love to have employees in place for the entirety of their careers, 30, 40, even 50 years. So I think
Mm,
having a point of view and being candid about it and embedding that into the way in which employees are recruited, evaluated, developed, given opportunities for growth. Is really important. Another one is on the values and behaviors that drive conversations and interactions. Does this organization value candor? Are we going to be frank and direct? Are we going to be a feedback culture? Are we more interested in motivating people than providing negative feedback? And do we want to be more positively focused? Those are choices that, again, if they're made sooner than later and they're shared with employees before they become
mm,
employees, then everybody can be on the same page in terms of what people are entering into if they choose to join an organization. And then ideally, the
sure.
organization's values and philosophy as experienced will match what is shared.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to have that transparency and the psychological safety. So I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. To give full transparency, to be, open with everything. So sometimes, like, and I usually give the example of Netflix because it's like a business case that's frequently shared, and it's not because Netflix has the nicest or the most flowery culture, but it's because they're transparent and they're like frank about everything, the performance and the expectation, so that everyone knows what's expected from them from day one. So I really believe that it's really important to give that transparency. And
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I think obviously transparency is critical. And then I think in terms of trust, making sure that leadership actions match the words and values and beliefs of the organization, and that when people are recognized either through promotions, when leaders are recognized either through promotion or recognition publicly, that recognition also matches those stated values and such. I think that goes a long way with the trust as well. I've seen organizations struggle where they have on paper, a very inspiring and wonderful values, but then the leadership behaviors within the organization don't actually align to those, and so that erodes I think the trust very quickly.
And if I can add on to that just a little bit, I think to go along with what Anne says, that a lot of what the employee experience can impact is, does the company have a culture where mistakes can be made and learned from? Because throughout especially for a new employee, you have those touch points, and like Francia said, you don't want to hear about mistakes on your annual performance review. Does the company allow or have a culture where mistakes can be made and you can learn from those mistakes without, it's the vulnerability piece of that trust, of that building that trust. Can we make mistakes? Is it okay to make mistakes? Do leaders make mistakes, and they have to be able to admit those mistakes, and that goes along with building trust.
Yeah.
So if I
100%.
can just add to that, do we even talk about it? You know, there is the
Yeah.
other piece of it where there are companies, you know, that are very, very open, and they communicate regularly and frequently, and they talk about it, and they discuss their values, and they discuss the mistakes. What did we learn? How do we get better?
Mhm.
And then there are other cultures where there's silence. There's silence about changes in the organization. There's silence about how's the business doing. There's silence about the mistakes, right? And so there's transparency, but there's, I think, one step further, which is, are we communicating? And it's through that communicating, that intentional communicating, that you can start to really build trust. An employee will learn very quickly, oh, it's okay to be open. Oh, it's okay to say, maybe XYZ is not going so well, or maybe it's going fantastic. But are we an organization that's actually talking, right? Are we talking to
Mhm.
our peers? Are we talking to our leaders? Can we go next level? And I think trust starts with that. When there is a culture of actually opening up and communicating, the trust really starts there. And then how we
Yeah.
deal with the information that's being shared really goes into embedding and really creating that greater trust within an organization.
Yeah. And it's really important that it doesn't stay in words, but just like, people see it in action, because otherwise they will not know if it's okay or not. I mean, everyone says that, okay, we're okay with mistakes. We are embracing mistakes. We have vulnerability today. But like, are we really showing them in practice? Do people see that when they make a mistake, it's okay? And it's even like, being shared with comfort, and everyone learns from it, but not just like judges. And usually when there is the blaming in the company, we see that that blame comes from this, that there is no real vulnerability, there is no real mistake sharing, or like failure sharing in the company. That's really important. Carol?
Thank you. I think one of the things, just to add to what has been said already, one of the things that also works in terms of building trust is when also you do get feedback. As you communicate and you get feedback, it's also taking action from the feedback that you heard. Where you're unable to take action, also communicating that you're unable to take actions for XYZ reasons. So it's really about depositing positively into the trust bank account, if I may put it that way. And that demonstration happens by some of the things we've said: communication, receiving feedback, what it is that we do with the feedback that we do receive, also being able to demonstrate care for the employee as well, and also just care beyond just the work itself, also caring for the individual as well. So really about just being human at heart, if I may put it that way as well. So trust is something that you build over time, and it's also something that can be lost really very quickly by the actions that are being taken. So that consciousness is really required to continue to make the right deposits into that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we're coming towards the end of our discussion, let me wrap up what we have already discussed. So we said that first impression is really important, and how it's important to identify those touch points and the journey, but also including the personal journeys, personal milestones in the employee experience. Then we talked about leadership, trust, and how we incorporate culture, how culture is really key in creating these positive employee experiences. Now, I want to ask you one question. How do we make sure, how do we measure this? How do we measure the effectiveness of the journey that we built, and also like, how it is supported by leadership and the culture? What are those, ways of assessing this, measuring this? Do we have any KPIs around this? And, or Sue, you want to go?
I'll jump in on this because I think probably everyone's thinking the same thing. So you have turnover, which can be measured by, especially your first year turnover, first 6 months turnover. That's really important. I think you can, if you're trying to create a new employee experience, take some data that you've already had, and then compare it after some changes, after you make some changes. Even just one change may make a big difference. But I think that's one KPI that you can use. Another would be employee engagement scores. Again, same thing. How do your employees feel during their lifetime with your company? Is it a good experience? Is it a not so good experience? And again, back to what Carol said, if you get some low scores or low scores in some areas, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to make some changes, or are you just going to take it for what it is and just accept it? So I think those are just two, and I'll let everybody else kind of expand on that.
Thank you. And
yeah, I'm happy to add to that. Going back, so I agree with Sue, and sort of think of the ones that Sue mentioned as overall, what's that pulse on the overall employee experience and engagement. And then as we think about some of the individual touch points that we talked about today, either doing survey follow-up, or depending on the size of the organization, even just one-on-one follow-up, to ask the employee, how was your experience? So if it's a new employee, how was your onboarding experience? What can we do to improve next time? Or if it's a new parent, when they return, how was the leave? How was your return to the office? So, doing either, if it's a large organization, it's probably more feasible to do survey feedback at those individual touch points. And then in the smaller organization, you could do more one-on-ones and focus groups to get that feedback.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, feedback I think is key to either improve or just see what's working, what's not working. So listening to the employee all the time. Francia?
Yeah, oftentimes companies do employee surveys. And, going back to Sue's point, it's like, how was your experience? And, there's this big general question about how was your experience. But one of the things that I've noticed is we're not asking that really pointed question. What are we talking about when you say your experience was either good or bad? Right? And then drilling down further into what the employee is defining as their experience. We have an idea, we say we have touch points, recruiting, onboarding, and so on. But how many companies actually ask that next level question is, okay, this is our concept. What is yours? And is this what is feeding into your score? I think part of the KPI is actually asking employees, hey, you've defined your experience as a 9 out of 10. Please tell us what that is so that we can look at that and improve that, or change some things, and using that KPI in and of itself to drive the touch points, to really define what could be new touch points after after an employee defines their experience. So it's not just the number of, I had a great experience. What is the experience? Why was it good or not so good? And more than that, how can we improve? And lastly, how can we show you that we are intentional about improving your experience?
Yeah. Again, coming back to intentionality, so that we make people feel that this is sincerely done. So this is not just checking the boxes, but there is intentionality, and this is being done so that we want to improve the employee experience, fundamentally. Sherry?
I think, I agree with all of those measures. So, I love, direct feedback, in the moment, one-on-one feedback, as well as focus group surveys and the like. I think, alongside those, looking at things like exits and talent flows can also provide insight into where things might be going wrong during the course, or where there might be opportunities for improvement or course correction during the employee life cycle. So, an example would be if you see a significant number of exits in the first 6 months, that could be a retroactive flag around onboarding where, if somebody sends me a survey after week one, I've spent a week on site or getting a lot of focused attention, everything's great, then, it's business as usual and I don't necessarily know where to go. So I think some of the touch points are also evaluated with a retroactive lens that can be used to then generate some predictive insights about we're going to lose people from this part of the organization or drive dissatisfaction if we don't improve certain touch points.
This is really important because usually companies react, so they're more reactive than proactive. So this is really important, so that getting that insight to just act upon. And Carol, by the way, we are also wrapping up. So Carol, if you want to add anything that in your experience has worked really well to assess and to take action, and how you see the employee experience practices evolving in the near future.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'll just maybe just add more to some of what has been shared. Yeah, so I think that in terms of measuring employee experience and maybe just looking into the future as well, I do see that there's also that significant shift from just focusing on engagement also to focus on experience. And that focus on experience would continue to be come to the fore the more because of the impact in terms of overall business results, in terms of also what I've seen particularly really work is just being able to connect employee experience to the customer experience. And that connection with the customer experience ultimately drives profitability for profit businesses as is where. In terms of measurements, I think that a blend of both the qualitative and quantitative is something that I've also seen work quite well. So being able to, in a typical survey manner, just take feedback from us in the survey format, but also asking qualitative questions that enables the employees that have experienced the different processes across different touch points provide direct feedback, which you can then analyze and just use a bit more in terms of sentiment analysis and all of that to get greater insights. But I think also just connecting it back to the conversation that we had on trust, is actually doing something about what it is that you're picking from all of this, and ultimately looking at the measures as a tool to improve the employee experience. And I think that as we continue to go further on the journey from a digital transformation point of view, there would be a lot more technology that would help in terms of working in very in strong partnership with the human touch that we bring on board, that enables us as professionals really drive this whole employee experience journey. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so as the closing remarks, and Francia, Sherry, and Sue, I would like to ask you very quickly one thing that you would advise the companies to start with, one simple thing to have a great employee experience. And
I just set it as a priority, and then go from there. I know it has to be brief, so set it as a priority.
okay, amazing. Sherry.
Think about where employee experience is owned outside of HR, and make sure that there is strong representation from technology, from facilities, from other parts of the organization. And we didn't talk a lot about digital, but experience is going to look very different. So think about what should be digitized and what should be and remain humanized.
Amazing. Sue?
Yeah, customize it to your organization. One size does not fit all. You have to learn and know what works for you and your company.
Amazing. Francia? You're on mute, Francia.
Sorry about that. Employee experience is a driver. It's a driver for engagement. It's a driver for retention. It's a driver for recruitment. It's a driver for so many things. So I'll just, echo Anne and say it must be a priority. It's a business driver. It's a people driver. It really is a catalyst to moving your business forward.
Amazing. So thank you everyone for joining the panel and sharing your insights, expertise with us today. And thank you to our audience for being with us today, listening to us, commenting and asking questions. It's at now the end of another Hacking HR panel as part of the June series. Please stay tuned because we have more panels coming up throughout the month. And see you next time and enjoy the rest of your days. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.